welcome Joe Gripe, Arborist of the Year, with our virtual tree walk, Buds and Blooms.
Hi everyone, it is now April 17th, 2020, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're bringing the trees to you. We're going to do another series on buds and blooms. First we're going to take a look at this Ohio buckeye, or yellow buckeye. It's a pretty rare tree. It is native to this area, but again, pretty rare. It has palmately compound leaves, interesting bark, and I wanted to point out before we look up further into the tree some of the lichens that are down here. This is the pattern of growth that's on the outside of the bark. We often get questions about that. People wonder if they're affecting the tree in some way, negatively or otherwise, and the tree is really just a host for this organism or combination of organisms to reside. So they're not pulling anything from the tree. It's actually a combination of an algae and a blue-green algae and a fungus coexisting together that make these formations. Some of them project out from the trunk a bit, and the one thing that it does indicate is good air quality. You'll never see these in cities or where there's a lot of air pollution. So when you see them, just know that you have pretty good air quality. Then we'll take a look up higher in the canopy now, and I'll show you some of the emerging leaves from the buds that have swollen. You can see they're elongating. These are the bud scales here, and the leaves that are inside the bud that are expanding and pushing open that bud. Then a little further back, I'll show you a little further along where some of the leaves have come out more fully. They're starting to develop. Again, it's palmately compound. And then we've got a developing flower head here. This will turn into a yellow upright flower cluster about that large on the tree. It's pretty unique to the tree, so they'll be blooming in another several weeks or so. So that's it, the yellow buckeye or Ohio buckeye. Okay, next we're going to take a look at the eastern redbud. This is a tree that you might not see too often, this particular tree anyway. It's in a back corner between Sea Wing and Meadowside, right along the hallway, an interior hallway. Eastern redbuds are native to this area. Not a very long-lived tree. They usually go about 30 to 40 years. They have some problems with decay and some inherent problems that cause an earlier demise. But they do have a really beautiful floral display. And one of the things that makes them so impactful is that they bloom before the leaves emerge. So we talked about that before on another tree we saw earlier. But I wanted to point out how, first of all, the distinct color of the flowers, then also how they're borne along the stems. So you get these delicate sprays of purple flowers along the stems. There's a tremendous amount of genetic diversity within the species, though. So if you were to grow them from seed, most of the trees would look wildly different. So you'd have some with different colored leaves, different growth patterns, even different colors of flowers. So nursery owners have taken some of the more interesting cultivars and bred them or propagated them asexually to keep those traits and then named them. So you see in the nursery tray a lot of different cultivars of this tree. It does have a nice form, and you'll see also there's some flower buds even breaking out along some of the older trunks. That's also pretty unique. The flowers are quite small, but they're so prolific, and again, they're born on the tree before the leaves emerge, so they are a little more impactful. The bark is usually pretty dark. It's a handsome bark. Again, not terribly long-lived, but a handsome, young, smaller, native flowering tree. All right, next we'll take a look at some pines. They also are having their buds elongate now. You can see these, we actually call these candles. So this is in the candling stage of growth for a pine. This is where this will become a new stem and new lateral branches. And then the leaves or needles will be borne along these as they extend out. So it's an interesting time of the year to see this stage. I want to point out these 3 trees, though. These are Tanyosho pines, or Japanese tabletop pines. It's one of my favorite trees, but they're very uncommon in the nursery trade now. They do get a fungal disease that's very difficult to treat and to care for, so you don't often see them in the trade. And they're a little difficult to grow for nurseries, so you don't normally see them. I was excited to get these. This one did have an outbreak of that fungus, but I was able to prune it out, and we were able to save it and keep it going. So that's why this one looks a little more open than the one in the back. That's a little fuller and a little more bushy. And then we had one that we lost, so we replaced it with another from the same nursery. So the smaller one over here. But they're all the same: Japanese tabletop pine or Tanyosho pine. Generally a smaller, flat-topped pine, but they do have very handsome exfoliating bark and a really nice form as they grow and mature. That's it. Okay, next we're going to take a look at a Japanese maple. This is a Japanese maple that was grown from seed. These are prolific seeders and can be a little invasive, but normally the trees that come from seed aren't cold hardy. This is one we found in a nurseryman's field nearby, and it was growing off on its own out on the edge of the woods. And we had just gone through 2 really exceptionally cold winters, and the tree did just fine, and it had a pretty tough exposure, so I knew that it was safe to use. It is a normal green-leafed Japanese maple, where some of them, the more popular varieties, have a burgundy leaf. This has a really exceptional fall color. So I wanted to point out, since everything is just emerging now, you can see some of the old bud scales that are red. It might be a little difficult to see them, but then the newly emerging leaves are very soft and delicate right now. They will be getting larger and fuller. And then we also have the little flowers in red. So the bud scales and leaf scales were red, the leaves are emerging green, and the flowers have this nice burgundy color. What also is really interesting about this tree is just its beautiful form. It's got this really interesting willowy architecture to it that I think is really graceful and really caught my eye when I first saw it. So I'm glad we were able to get it transplanted here. It's in a pretty prominent location, so a lot of residents get to see it. This is just opposite the meeting room. So there's a lot of traffic in the hallway where people get to admire the tree. So, Japanese maple. Okay, the next tree we'll talk about is a pond cypress. This is a really close relative to our bald cypresses that we have primarily around the lakes. This is a lesser known tree, though maybe just as good. The Latin name is Taxodium ascendens, primarily because the leaves, when they're first forming, ascend. So you can see how they're just starting to come out now. It's really interesting. Very similar to the 3 dwarf bald cypresses that we have just outside the cafe, out by the whirligig, out those windows there. We get a lot of comments about, or questions about those trees every spring. This is a deciduous conifer, so it loses its leaves in the fall, but bears cones. So conifer and evergreen is not synonymous. Probably not the best location for this one, just because it's right, you see it as you're exiting parking lot 9, and every fall I get phone calls that this tree has died. It hasn't died, it's just shedding its leaves. It's supposed to do that. Really nice form to it, nice straight central trunk, central leader, and a handsome tree, really tolerant of a lot of poor soils and air pollution too. So a tough, durable tree. Pond cypress. Okay, next we'll talk about some daffodils. We get a lot of compliments this time of year for daffodils. They're one of those frustrating plants that when you're thinking about daffodils, you can't plant them. You really have to plant them in the fall, and you're not going to get the benefit of them until the spring. But normally when we plant daffodils, we go with the perennializing type. So they're a much larger bulb, and maybe not quite as beautiful, but they're going to be around for many years to come. So they can really get established and build up big, healthy bulbs to give you a nice floral display year after year. We're in an area now at the south end of building 42 and 41, and we've got large sweeps of daffodils here. But I just wanted to point out how different they can be. Even though we're looking for the same kind of strong perennializing bulbs, there's a tremendous amount of diversity within them. And maybe it would be worth it to, the next time you're out walking, to stop by and just take a look at some of the different types there are. So the center part can be a darker color. Some you might see are orange with a yellow outer. The petals on the outside are lighter. Some are a little more delicate. This is the reverse, where the inside part is light and the outside is dark. There's any number of different types and styles in here. Some that are really bright yellow. They really stand out. Then a more peach tone on the inside. And we just happen to notice this one in a group of different ones that looks to be a double with lots and lots of petals with some dark orange parts inside there. So lots of different things styles and types to admire in this area. So here we are at the south end of building 42, and I just wanted to point out all of the beautiful colors and textures that exist in this planting on both sides of this sidewalk. Perimeter Road is to the rear of the camera, and we're looking northward now. So we've got different leaf types. We've got needles and scales and leaves. We've got an espalier form of pyracantha up against the wall, blue spruce, weeping red-leafed Japanese maple, then two hollies. They're dragon lady hollies flanking the door. Then on the other side, a green-leafed Japanese holly, and below it is a very handsome stone wall. That's stone that was brought down from the Adirondacks. Then before we did talk about the eastern red buds and how they can be very different, and nursery owners will take cuttings to promote a different either characteristic, a flower type or leaf color or growing form. Off to the right here you can see two white flowered red buds, but you can see their form is really weak. So they're very interesting in that they're white flowered red buds, but the form is kind of rough and they really require a lot of space. We continue to prune them up, but they still just want to flop over, and they're more shrubby than they are a proper tree. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, so we've got another maple hailing from Japan. This is not a true Japanese maple by common name. This is full moon maple, Acer palmatum. It's got a larger, rounded leaf. It's a little thicker and really handsome form. This also has exquisite fall color and a really interesting architecture. It's interesting now to see these leaves starting to form. You can see them a little further along, the shape of the leaf, and again the flowers underneath it will, that's where the little helicopters or schizocarps will be formed. So interesting contrast though between the dark ruby flowers and the light green leaves. And down below we've got a planting of hellebores, that's Lenten rose. This is a little bit more of a subtle form. The flower blooms usually for several months. This particular one is a little bit darker. You kind of have to look for it, but it's a very beautiful flower, and it is a perennial. We're using it here as a ground cover. And lastly, we've got a dwarf American holly off on the side here. That's incredibly slow growing. Usually doesn't get to be more than 2.5 or 3 feet, and a very slow growing dwarf version of our native American holly.